After my grandpa told me about the last case, the one about the backwards man, he told me to make the tentative planned Skype call to a colleague of his in Arizona. Connectivity issues on both sides didn't allow us to have the call when he'd initially planned, and schedules got in the way of that. That said, we all eventually found the time, got the call, and we connected. My grandpa and I, we were soon talking to a detective in Arizona named Adam, a man my grandpa had met at a conference years prior. A small talk was made, and my grandpa quickly got to the point. He said, I know that we talked about it for a little while, you about those cases, kinds that don't usually make any sense. He said, oh yeah, the impossible cases. Impossible ones, that's right. Down here they call them the inconceivables. Like in the movie. My grandpa joked. He laughed for a minute, during which time Adam said that they did indeed get the name from the Princess Bride. And that he went... Well, and then he went into one of his very own impossible cases.
A lot of desert down here, a lot of long, empty roads. Nothing but open land on either side, a few skinny trees here and there, and cacti, no real structures or anything to speak of. Got a call out of a crime scene in, around 2002, right after 9/11, I remember. Not that one has anything to do with the other, anyhow. I drove out there, and this in the middle of nowhere, like I had to drive 20 miles off the road just to get to it. It was middle of nowhere. Middle of the night when I got there, 2 or 3 in the morning, they had these big floodlights set up outside the tape. The tape was set up way farther out than I initially would have thought necessary, real wide around the focal point of what I'd been called out for. I get out there, a few other little pathways we could take to get to her, and I was led in by one of the officers. Standing there in the middle of this big-ass area was a woman, like maybe 30, and she was standing mid-stride like she was just walking through the desert. 1 second later, boom, died. Foot pointed up like she'd just taken a step, and then she just frozen. Had the techs out there trying to figure out exactly where she'd come from. It was one of the weirdest things, footprint. So where it was leading up to where this woman was, there was no footprints. Ground didn't have any imprints whatsoever, not in the slightest. No, leading up to where she was standing is just like she just floated down right out of the sky. There she was. Around her, maybe 15 yards or so, there were these, I don't want to call them prints, because they weren't. But there are these tracks. I don't know what to call them. They're like something had been shuffling around, something big. I mean, they looked like they'd stepped lightly, but when they were pointed out to me, I could plainly see they'd left depressions in the ground. They weren't shaped or structured like footprints. They were just these weird kind of collections, I guess you'd say, of spirals. Spirals. Groups of 5 or 6 of them, different sizes and angles, where if you drew them, you drew a line around them, it looked like, I guess maybe like a rhombus. Maybe there were 4 separate collections of these, maybe 20, 25 different size spirals, some circle, some triangle, some square-shaped, 20, 25 total. If you drew a line around the collection of rhombuses, the rhombi, I guess, if you drew a line around those, it made almost a perfect rectangle. There's no real way to put it into words. Well, this is for that blog, whatever Stevie was saying that you were doing with these. Where was I? Shit. Okay, so it was the desert. It was cold, maybe 40 degrees, give or take, but part of the girl's skin was frostbitten. So if it would have been her whole body, I might have thought that she'd been walking naked through the Arctic after getting out of a swimming pool filled with ice water, that dark purple, the black color. There's just these patches, like all over, big sections of her thigh, top of her knuckles, side of her neck, her shoulder blade. Maybe spots of her had been dipped into sub-zero temperatures or something, but just those parts. No. The tracks that we were talking about before. So like I said, there are these big circles, about 15, maybe close to 20 yards out from her. Each one of those rectangles, the one with the 4 rhombuses in them, they must have been 12 or 15 feet apiece, maybe 6 feet wide. It's fucking huge, these things. So I know what you might be thinking. It sounds like someone drew them. The text said that the depression pattern in the ground indicated that the symbols were most depressed on the end, not so much in the middle, like someone stepping heel to toe. Obviously, someone could have done these on purpose, but why? You know, they went in a circle around this woman, and they overlapped each other a whole lot, like someone had just done laps. I suppose it's worth mentioning, we didn't realize all these spirals and shapes and everything right away. It took us a few days before the text put it together. I mean, the shapes were apparent right away, but I just mean that the patterns and all that, when you first look at it, it just looks like a bunch of nonsense scribbles with no rhyme or reason to it. Craziest thing about the tracks, maybe 200 yards away, was another big circle of them. Same circumference, but they just made one circle, no laps. And the depression in that one was deep, like it had been stomped down. About 200 yards after that was another one, depression even deeper. That was it. Say it was like whatever had left it had dropped out of the sky, landed, boom, and jumped, boom, another one, and jumped again, and landed lightly on the last one, and circled this woman. Nobody knew what it could have been, I mean, obviously. Usually, the weird ones, some people speculate. Not with those. No one can come up with any kind of explanation. Alright, back to the girl. So she didn't have any ID on her. No wallet or purse or nothing. She was wearing a tank top and shorts. I said she was frostbitten. Well, her face wasn't at all. As heavy, it was as dry as I've ever seen a face in my life. Her lips were cracked all to shit. Her skin was sunburnt and flaky. That's why the ME, the medical examiner, told us the cause of death was drowning. We couldn't believe it. By all accounts, drowning should have been the last possible cause of death, but the ME said she would stake her whole career on it, that any subsequent analysis of the autopsy would result by any other MEs would yield the same results, and it wasn't a dry drowning. It was like she'd been held underwater till she died. Stomach contents, I remember, there was water, of course. There were also blades of grass. So initially we thought maybe she was starving, tried eating some grass, yeah. It was sod, fake grass. Wasn't a whole lot of it in there, you know. She didn't have a whole front lawn in her stomach, but there was enough you could cover the bottom of a water bottle with the grass standing up. You know what I mean? So even more messed up, get this, she'd put the time of death as being about 8 hours after I'd shown up in the desert. No kidding. She'd apparently been alive the whole time I was skulking around checking it all out. I've been right up close to her, inches away. Didn't see her chest moving. Didn't feel any breath coming out of her, nothing. Didn't make a shred of sense. That was just the time she recorded. She said there were multiple factors that contradicted one another. How I said she was standing, the rigor mortis had somehow set in instantly. Amy said that was impossible. And that's what it was. But despite the rigor mortis being an indicator of TOD, her stomach content made the ME think that it hadn't been that long. Same with the fact that no insects had any other creepy crawlies anywhere near her. But then there was the fact that a few of her organs were deteriorated, like she'd been dead for days. It's just, I can't wrap my mind around it. Alright, so, well, anyway, we had to find out who this woman was. We started looking at recent missing persons reports, fall back at maybe 6 months. Didn't turn up anything. Checked out the surrounding states, nothing. Fingerprints. Well, it wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. She had 2 sets of fingerprints on each finger. That's a bad way to put it. On each finger, she had half of one fingerprint on the left, half another fingerprint on the right. Lines they just didn't connect like they should have. Anyway, it'd be easier to show you what I mean, but you can't really show you what I mean through the written word. Bizarre. They had a specialist come in, try to reconnect the print. Nothing came of it. And then maybe 3 months after she was found out there, a call was placed to 911, word for word. Man's voice said, "The woman in the desert, Amber Lee." He hung up. The call was placed from a payphone outside of a convenience store in Massachusetts. One that had been out of service for about 2 years. Never mind the fact the phone didn't even work, but how the hell did someone dial 911 get connected to dispatch across the country? And call over to Massachusetts State Police, send them over the woman's picture. That and go through their database, missing persons, all that. There's nothing about her there. There was a woman with the name Amber Lee that lived in a suburb outside of Cambridge. She was alive and well. We never found out who Amber Lee was or how she wound up in the desert, and that's tragic, because this woman, whoever she was, she might have had family, people who loved her. Even if not, she deserved better than what happened to her. But for as tragic as what happened to her, it's not what fucks with me. What fucks with me is the fact that there's something out in the desert. Something that, even if we knew what it was, how to find it, I don't think we'd even be halfway equipped to deal with it.
After he was done telling me the story, he offered to put us in touch with both his son, another Arizona homicide detective, and a colleague in Colorado who knows some crazy stories. So hopefully we'll hear from him soon. After we hung up, he calls back about 2 minutes later.
I tell your friends on the blog there's not much of a story to this one, just something that happened that we never figured out. Never had a single clue on. Never found out who it was, who did it, how it was done. Nothing. About 100 things wrong with this one, but it'll be funny to make them scratch their heads trying to figure out, because it really just doesn't sound possible, logically or otherwise. Some folks are bowling, and right in the middle of the game, this girl throws her ball, and then she's standing at the return waiting for a ball to come back, and out comes out a human head. Maybe male. Maybe 40 years old. Alright. Take care, boys.
Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to tell you all thank you so much for listening to tonight's story, or watching tonight's story if you're on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, that means you're probably on the podcast that's available on iTunes, on the Google Play Store, and is now actually available on Spotify, and doesn't use as much data. So, hey, that's a thing. If you guys aren't listening on YouTube or Spotify, then I have no idea how else you could have found me. Unless you found one of those books on Amazon. The CreepyPasta Collection, Volume 1, Volume 2. Those are things too. Oh well, I don't know how you would have heard me there, seeing as this was recorded like 2 years after those came out. Well, anyway. Thanks for listening, folks. And sweet dreams.